A bull terrier attacked a royal guard and its owner paid the price. Curious how it all unfolded? Read on to find out.
Be sure to subscribe to the channel and let's promote respect for the royal guard together. Let the whole world see how many of us there are.
The London fog slowly dissipated under the morning sun, bathing the area around Buckingham Palace in soft golden hues. Tourists filled the space near the barriers, a sea of eager faces. The sound of cameras clicking, children laughing, and conversations in various languages created a symphony of excitement. Everyone was waiting, watching the changing of the guard. An event that never failed to captivate, was always a highlight. On duty stood Lieutenant George Rivers, a 30-year-old guardsman with impeccable posture. His scarlet tunic was flawlessly pressed, every button gleaming in the sunlight, while his tall bearskin hat added to his commanding presence. George was as motionless as a stone. His gaze, fixed on the distance, ignored the hum of the crowd and the tourists' futile attempts to provoke even a flicker of emotion. But today, the ceremony wasn't the sole focus of attention. In the heart of the gathered crowd stood a man who drew every eye, a tall, broad-shouldered figure with sharp features. This was Ryan Drake. His black leather jacket and torn jeans gave him the appearance of a character from a crime novel. In one hand, he gripped a sturdy leash connected to a powerful white bull terrier with black patches. The dog was restless, pacing back and forth, as though sensing its owner's tension. Ryan's booming laughter cut through the general chatter, drawing uneasy glances. "Look at these clowns!" he bellowed, pointing toward the guards. "Afraid to blink! Is this your royal protection?" The crowd murmured. Some people nervously stepped back, sensing potential trouble. Others, particularly younger onlookers, raised their phones, eager to capture something extraordinary. George, as expected, did not flinch. His face remained a mask of composure, though deep inside he felt the shadow of something ominous approaching. The bull terrier suddenly stiffened, its ears flattened, and a low growl rumbled from its throat. The dog's eyes locked onto George as if he were a threat. Instead of calming the dog, Ryan smirked at its behavior. "Hey, pal!" Ryan shouted toward George, his voice dripping with mockery. "Are you even alive? Or are you just part of the scenery?" Some tourists, sensing the tension rising, attempted to reason with Ryan. "Take your dog away. This isn't safe. The Royal Guard doesn't play around." But Ryan ignored the warnings. He turned to the crowd with a smirk. "They're scared," he declared loudly. "Even the dog can sense their weakness." The crowd fell silent. Eyes darted back and forth between Ryan and George. The bull terrier, still growling, took a few steps forward. Its sharp teeth gleamed in the sunlight as it pulled against the leash. Ryan leaned in slightly, allowing the dog to inch closer to the barrier. "You're a protector, huh?" Ryan sneered. "Show us how you protect your crown. Or are you just all uniform and no courage?" George stood like a statue. His gaze remained steady and calm. He betrayed no sign of fear, though every fiber of his being was alert. The tension was palpable. Suddenly, a loud voice cut through the air. "This has gone far enough! Stop this immediately!" But Ryan paid no heed. With a sharp tug, he loosened the leash. The bull terrier lunged forward. The crowd gasped. Time seemed to slow as everyone braced for the inevitable clash. The scene outside Buckingham Palace was frozen in suspense. The rhythmic growl of the bull terrier matched the held breaths of the tourists. The white dog, speckled with black patches, pulled at its leash with such force that its muscular frame was fully visible under its short fur. Its eyes stayed fixed on the unmoving figure of the guardsman. The air crackled with anticipation, like the tense moments before a storm. Ryan, tall and menacing, seemed to thrive on the attention. His grin widened with every step he took closer to the barrier. His black leather jacket glinted in the sun, while his torn jeans only amplified his rebellious demeanor. He was clearly enjoying the role he had crafted for himself. "Hey, Redcoat," Ryan jeered, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Even my dog knows you're just decoration. Where's your reaction? Don't you know how ridiculous you look?" George Rivers, standing firm in his post, didn't move an inch. His gaze remained steadfast, though a subtle tightening of his jaw betrayed his awareness of the escalating situation. Bound by his duty, he couldn't respond. His face remained stern and focused, masking the readiness building within him. The crowd stirred uneasily. People began inching backward, sensing the brewing danger. A young woman in a light coat voiced her concern. "Someone needs to stop this. It's getting dangerous." An elderly man with a cane added gravely, "That man's lost his mind." Ryan, unfazed by their remarks, suddenly loosened his grip on the leash, granting the dog more freedom. The bull terrier stopped growling and crouched low, its gaze sharper than ever. Phones were raised high in the air, recording the unfolding drama. Everyone seemed to brace themselves for what felt like an inevitable disaster. "All right, George," Ryan taunted with a wicked grin. "Let's see what your royal discipline is made of." With a loud clap on his thigh, Ryan signaled the dog. The terrier froze momentarily before silently inching forward. George stood resolute. His eyes stayed locked on the dog, his body rigid but ready. Beneath his impeccably pressed uniform, his muscles tensed in preparation for what might come next. "Ryan, stop! You've gone too far!" a man from the crowd shouted, his voice drowned out by the noise. Ryan only smirked wider and leaned down toward the bull terrier. "Go on, buddy. Show them who's king," he whispered, letting the leash go slack. Sensing its newfound freedom, the dog tensed, then surged forward. It vaulted over the barrier with the agility of a predator, aiming straight for George. The crowd erupted in gasps. Someone screamed. Others scrambled to get out of the way, while many kept their phones trained on the chaos. The bull terrier's gaze stayed locked on the scarlet uniform, its target clear. Time seemed to stretch. George stood firm, his breathing steady, his focus unshaken. He knew he had mere moments to act if the dog attacked. Breaking protocol meant betraying his service, but inaction was not an option. The dog closed in, its bared teeth gleaming. The crowd's collective panic swelled. Some called for the police, while others yelled in fright. The scene was on the brink of spiraling into uncontrollable chaos. The square in front of Buckingham Palace turned into a chaotic arena as panic swept through the crowd. Tourists, who had gathered to watch the ceremonial changing of the guard, now erupted into shouts of alarm. "Call the police! This isn't a joke!" The dog's target was clear. The bull terrier, its sharp teeth gleaming in the sunlight, lunged at George. The powerful strides of its muscular legs carried it forward, its eyes fixed on the motionless guardsman. Frightened onlookers began to scatter, though some raised their phones, recording every tense moment instead of helping. George, despite the imminent danger, did not flinch. His face remained a mask of icy composure, but internally his instincts screamed at him to act. He knew, however, that stepping outside protocol was a rare exception, permitted only in life-threatening circumstances. "Watch out!" shouted a woman in the crowd. The bull terrier leapt at George. Its first target was his leg. The thick leather of his military-grade boots absorbed most of the force, but the dog's teeth still punctured the outer layer, sending a sharp jolt of pain up his leg. George took a small step back to maintain his balance, his disciplined poise unbroken despite the injury. Sensing its advantage, the dog tightened its grip, growling and jerking its head as it tried to tear through the material. Its tail wagged furiously, like a predator savoring its hunt. George held firm, his stoic expression betraying none of the searing pain coursing through him, though a bead of sweat glistened on his temple. Raising his voice above the commotion, Ryan broke into hysterical laughter, his tone dripping with derision. "Well, hero, do I have your attention now? How does it feel to be the prey for once?" George didn't respond, his steely gaze locked onto the dog. Despite the pain, he calmly raised his arm and signaled to nearby Royal Guard officers. The calculated, professional movement showed he was still in control. The crowd parted as 2 Royal Guard officers entered the scene with urgency. Their movements were swift and deliberate, their expressions resolute. The lead officer, a tall and broad man, barked an authoritative order. "Restrain the dog immediately. Step away from the guard." Ryan, who had been smirking smugly, hesitated for a brief moment. Tugging at the leash, he attempted to call the dog back, but it was too late. The bull terrier, driven by adrenaline and instinct, ignored its owner entirely. It continued growling and pulling toward George, making another attempt to close the gap. Even as blood seeped into his boot from the puncture wound, George maintained his stance. His unyielding posture was a testament to his training. Finally, as the dog's grip loosened, George stepped back slightly, adjusting his position to regain full balance. Despite the assault, his uniform remained immaculate, a silent testament to his resolve. "Come on, it was just a joke. The dog didn't mean any harm," Ryan shouted, his voice teetering between arrogance and desperation. But the crowd drowned him out with jeers. "This is an attack. Arrest him. Shame on you. Take that dog away." The bull terrier, still snarling, was finally restrained by the officers, who used firm grips and precise commands to subdue the animal. Ryan, seeing the situation spiral out of his control, lost his confident smirk. A flicker of realization crossed his face. He had gone too far. George, standing tall at his post, gave a brief nod to the officers, signaling he was capable of continuing his duty. However, the dark stain spreading across his boot betrayed the physical toll of the attack. The morning had transformed from an iconic tourist moment into a dramatic and unforgettable scene. The area in front of Buckingham Palace had descended into chaos, but the Royal Guard officers acted with flawless precision. One officer firmly grabbed the dog's leash, pulling the still growling bull terrier away from George. Another officer turned to Ryan, his expression cold and unyielding. "Sir, you are under arrest for assaulting a member of the Royal Guard and endangering public safety," he declared loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Ryan, stunned by the sudden turn of events, tried to resist. His face twisted with anger as he yelled provocatively, "Assault? Are you kidding me? It was just a joke. Can't anyone take a joke these days?" Ignoring Ryan's protests, the officer swiftly pinned his arm behind his back. The sharp, metallic click of handcuffs silenced him mid-sentence, driving home the seriousness of the situation. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Onlookers shouted their approval. "That's what he deserves. Respect the Royal Guard. Thank you for your service." George, still standing tall despite the injury, remained a picture of discipline. The blood soaking into his boot and the torn fabric of his trousers spoke volumes about the gravity of the attack, but his unwavering composure only amplified the respect he commanded. As officers approached him, one tourist stepped forward and raised a hand in a gesture of respect. "Thank you for your service, sir," the man said sincerely. George gave a curt nod, his gaze steady even as relief washed over him internally. Meanwhile, paramedics arrived to assess his injury. One of them, a middle-aged woman with a professional demeanor, knelt to examine his leg. "The bite is deep," she said quietly. "We'll treat it here, but you'll need to go to the hospital to prevent infection." George nodded subtly, keeping his focus sharp. For a moment, his eyes met Ryan's as the latter was escorted away in handcuffs. Ryan continued yelling incoherently, but his voice was drowned out by the cheers of the crowd. "Are you all right, George?" asked an officer, stepping closer. "I'm fine, sir," he replied firmly. The medics carefully guided George toward an ambulance, while the crowd erupted into applause and shouts of gratitude. Officers secured the perimeter, ensuring order as tourists documented every detail with their cameras. What had begun as a routine morning at Buckingham Palace ended in a spectacle of drama, discipline, and justice, an incident none of the witnesses would ever forget. The events outside Buckingham Palace spread across the internet like wildfire. Videos of the attack, recorded by tourists, quickly went viral. The footage showed Ryan's bull terrier lunging at the royal guard and the dramatic scene of Ryan's arrest amid a wave of applause from the crowd. The internet was flooded with furious comments. Headlines on news sites and in newspapers read, "Assault on a symbol of royal discipline, dog vs. guard. Irresponsible behavior in public, tourist arrested following Buckingham Palace incident. Royal Guard remains unyielding in the face of adversity." The video amassed millions of views and tens of thousands of comments as people weighed in on the shocking incident. How could someone be so reckless? A dog isn't a toy. The guard showed incredible composure. Bravo for his restraint. This guy got what he deserved. Respect those who defend our traditions. However, some attempted to defend Ryan. It was just a mistake. The dog isn't at fault, and the guards could have been more flexible. Meanwhile, under police custody, Ryan gave a brief interview to a local journalist. Attempting to shift the narrative, he portrayed himself as a victim of excessive punishment. On camera, he said, "It was just a silly incident. I didn't think they'd take it so seriously. The British are always so stiff and serious. Maybe they need to learn how to laugh." Instead of gaining sympathy, Ryan's remarks fueled even more public outrage. Online users slammed him in the comments. Does he really think this is funny? A dog bite isn't a joke. People like him don't understand that discipline and tradition are part of our culture. I hope the court gives him a lesson he won't forget. Ryan became a lightning rod for criticism. His name and actions dissected not only on social media, but also on TV. Morning talk shows brought in experts to discuss the incident, asking, what drives tourists to act so disrespectfully toward symbols of our nation? Support for George. While Ryan faced mounting backlash, George, still recovering from his injuries, experienced an outpouring of gratitude and admiration. Letters, flowers, and thank you cards poured into the hospital where he was being treated. One letter in particular caught the attention of the medical staff. Dear Guardsman George, your composure and bravery are inspiring. Thank you for your service. True to his character, George remained humble and avoided the limelight. When approached by reporters, he gave a simple but meaningful response. I was just doing my job. We stand guard not for entertainment, but to protect what matters to our country. The incident gained international attention, with coverage extending far beyond the UK. Headlines in foreign publications echoed the same sentiment, highlighting Ryan's reckless actions. Tourists' arrogance leads to Buckingham Palace incident. When disrespect crosses the line, Royal Guard stays strong amid attack. Amid the discussions, important questions emerged. How far will tourists go before they understand the consequences of their actions? Should rules around Buckingham Palace be made stricter to prevent such incidents? This chapter of the story became a lesson about boundaries that should never be crossed. While Ryan tried to justify his actions and salvage his reputation, his efforts only worsened his situation. In contrast, George emerged as a symbol of unwavering honor and tradition. The courtroom was packed to capacity. Reporters, lawyers, and even a handful of curious citizens eager to witness the proceedings filled every seat. At the center of it all was Ryan Drake, whose behavior had become synonymous with irresponsibility and arrogance. Gone was the smug confidence he had displayed at Buckingham Palace. Now, dressed in a black suit that clashed with his usual rebellious style, Ryan looked like a man fully aware of the gravity of his situation. The prosecution laid out its case with precision, presenting the following evidence. The viral video, which captured the exact moment the bull terrier attacked George, while Ryan laughed instead of restraining his dog. Eyewitness testimony, with tourists unanimously condemning Ryan's actions. A medical report, detailing the deep puncture wounds on George's leg and the treatment required to prevent infection. The judge, an elderly man with a piercing gaze, listened intently to both sides. When Ryan took the stand, his voice lacked its usual bravado as he tried to explain himself. "Your Honor, it was just a stupid joke. I didn't think it would go this far." His words only heightened the tension in the courtroom. The judge raised a hand, commanding silence. "Mr. Drake," he began sternly, "your joke had real consequences. Your dog's attack endangered the health and safety of a man representing the Royal Guard. Furthermore, your behavior demonstrated blatant disrespect for the traditions and people who uphold them." The sentence, delivered with finality, struck like a hammer. "You are hereby sentenced to 8 months in prison for disturbing public order and endangering public safety." Ryan's face crumpled as officers escorted him out of the courtroom. Outside, a crowd erupted into applause at the news of his sentence. "That's what he gets! Learn to respect others!" someone shouted. Plus, George's return. As Ryan faced the consequences of his actions, George continued his recovery. His service was temporarily paused to allow him time to heal fully, but news of his eventual return to duty sparked a wave of public support. Cards, flowers, and messages of respect continued to flood in. When George finally resumed his post outside Buckingham Palace, the crowd greeted him with cheers and applause. Standing tall and composed as ever, he exuded the quiet dignity that had earned him admiration far and wide. Asked for a comment by journalists, George replied simply, "I'm just doing my job." A lasting impact. This incident left an indelible mark on the public consciousness. For weeks, social media and news outlets buzzed with debates about acceptable behavior and the importance of respecting traditions. Many saw the event as a stark reminder that jokes crossing the line can carry serious consequences. Newspaper headlines proclaimed, "The Guard who stood strong amid chaos." Tourist faces, justice for disrespecting royal traditions. The story of Ryan Drake and his bull terrier became a cautionary tale for all. It prompted a broader discussion about the need for respect, not just for the law, but for those who symbolize discipline and order. Meanwhile, George, returning to his duties with the same quiet resilience, became a living embodiment of honor, strength, and discipline, earning admiration well beyond the gates of London.